One Neil out, one Neil in. Ian Machado-Garry, right?
Mhm. This is true.
Machado-Garry?
With
Yeah,
a little
okay.
hyphen, dash, whatever they're called.
It's Machado-Garry, not Gary Machado.
Correct.
He's staying on the card next week in Boston, UFC 292, but he will no longer be taking on Geoff Neal. Instead, he takes on the Doodle Bob to SpongeBob to in Neil Magny.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that guy? That guy seems fitting. Neil Magny is like the Doodle Bob to Geoff
Sure.
Neal's SpongeBob a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you.
Anyways, Ian Gary taking on Neil Magny instead. And Dominic, this was the matchup that Ian Gary
Yeah.
originally called for when he won. When was that? Was that International Fight Week? When did he win? That
It
was
was not long ago. Yeah.
It was a little before that, probably. But yeah, that was the original matchup he called for. He got Geoff Neal instead, who is, I would, even though Geoff Neal does have a loss to Neil Magny in the last couple of years, it kind of felt like a tougher fight in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. But I want to get your thoughts because I think you were pretty in on the idea of him fighting Neil Magny. But now that you had the Geoff Neal fight kind of taken from you and replaced with the Neil Magny fight, are you still happy that we're seeing Ian Gary take on a ranked competitor? Is it feel like we're still losing something though by not getting to see that Geoff Neal fight?
I think the dynamic of the fight is way different now, for sure. Just look at the types of fighters. You're looking at Geoff Neal, who will stand and bang, and he's looking better and better, really, his last few fights, even in losing efforts. And,
Hands of steel,
Neil
baby.
Magny, yeah. And Neil Magny, 36, been there, done that, has the record or tied for the record with GSP. I think he actually beat GSP for most wins in the welterweight division, but he does it in a very different way than most. Grapple heavy, but a very intelligent fighter. So it's a very different fight for Ian to take on essentially like 9 days notice. So I think there's pros and cons here. I think the fight won't be as closely contested. I do lean Gary relatively heavy now against Magny. But all in all, if you're going to lose someone, at least you can fill in with Neil Magny, someone that is ranked, that has a very good credibility here. Ian Gary wanted it from the get-go, so really it's kind of just a full circle moment for him. And I'm a sucker for this whole 6-fight plan that Ian Gary started with Daniel Rodriguez, and it feels like now with Magny, maybe it's a little bit more feasible to do that than getting rushed in a couple fights less. So I'm here for it if you're going to get a replacement.
Yeah, first off, maybe I should have said uh, hands of steel being replaced with balls of steel because
Yeah,
Neil Magny is that guy, man. This guy is
he
always
is.
looking for the toughest fights. He's looking to be that kind of gatekeeper, that guy that he looks to be placed in those stepping stone fights and try to shock the world. And I give him a lot of credit for that. A lot of people, when they see Neil Magny fight, they're not that impressed, right? He's very
Sure.
clinch heavy. He tends to win by making his opponents look worse. That seems to be this interesting dynamic in Neil Magny fights. Is you're not really wowed most of the time by what he's doing. You mostly just notice that he finds a way to really neutralize everything that his opponent offers. And I think that's actually a very unique skill that
Yeah.
he brings to the table, even at this age. You saw it in his last fight. I forgot who his opponent was off the top of my head, but
For Magny,
yeah,
Phil Rowe.
yes, thank you, Phil Rowe. But Phil Rowe was another guy who was it was his biggest opportunity to date, but had looked much better in his fights before that, and then he comes in against Neil Magny, and it's like he can't do anything.
Yeah.
So I do like the fight. I don't remember how I felt about it when Gary called for it. But if I said I didn't like it, scratch that from the record. Thank you very much. I like the fight. I like that Ian Gary's staying on the card, but obviously we're missing out by not getting the Geoff Neal fight.
Sure.
And that was most notably because Ian Gary was poking the bear. Like, I don't
There's
think
some
that.
heat. Yeah.
I think there's a good chance that fight gets run back at some point.
I think so.
Because I don't think Geoff Neal's going to let that one slide. All in good fun or all in the name of fight promotion. I don't think Geoff Neal plays those games. And
Yeah.
I like Ian Gary a lot. This is not me shitting on him by any means by saying that, but when you put a guy's mugshot and sell it as like merch on a T-shirt, I'm sure Ian Gary was expecting it, and
Yeah.
he was going to get a really angry and
Yes.
motivated version of Geoff Neal. And instead, he gets a short notice, older, maybe a little long in the tooth, Neil Magny, not as dangerous of an opponent. So for him, he's should be counting his blessings right now. Because I'll be honest with you, Dominic, I want to ask you this: how were you feeling about that fight with
Uh,
Gary and Neil? Because to
yeah.
me, I was having a hard time not siding with Geoff Neal and even potentially placing a bet on him. I don't know what the odds were for that
He was a
fight,
big
but
dog, I'm pretty sure.
really,
Yeah, I
man.
think
Although I
Ian
was
Gary was
surprised
over
when
2-1.
see Dominic, but what happened last time when Daniel Rodriguez was a huge dog, and I was like, look, these odds make no sense. That's why I'm picking Ian Gary.
Yeah,
I may end up doing the same thing. The rat
sure.
lines, you just
Yeah.
sniff them out. But in my head, I was like, dude, I want to hammer Geoff Neal. Like
Yeah.
the way he looked, not even in losing effort against
Just
Shavkat,
exactly. Yeah.
it was such an intriguing fight. And it's weird because Neil Magny just beat Geoff Neal like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And yet it feels like Geoff Neal's just on another
He's
level than Neil
he's really
Magny is.
has, it seems, taken that next step. I feel like I was leaning Gary, I guess, but not what the
Mm.
odds were saying. I thought it was going to be a very good fight. And again, it's hard not to expect anything less when you look at what Geoff Neal's been doing lately. So, I wouldn't be surprised if, the Monday after UFC 292 here in 10 days, I'm coming on and saying, Ian Gary, Geoff Neal, that's the fight to make end of
Yeah.
the year. Like, I'm probably going to be saying that should Ian Gary beat Neil Magny in Boston. So I think there's a rivalry there. It makes it even more deep now. Ian Gary posted the video on Twitter saying all that stuff in the car with his manager. Like, there's just this whole thing building and simmering. It almost maybe is better for this story between them that it may happen just a tad bit later down the road. But yeah, I think I would have leaned Gary. And if he beats Magny here, will I still lean Gary when they rebook it? I guess we'll see when the time comes.
You know what? I love that you threw that there at the end, Dominic. Just planting the seed there. You
Mm-hmm.
planting the seed a little bit. The idea that this fight could be bigger when it's rebooked because that whole thing with the mugshot and all that happened just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
Before that, there really wasn't like
right.
these two weren't really going at it like that. I think Ian Gary, that was kind of the first step he
Mm-hmm.
took in sort of embracing, being the promoter, being or
Sure.
acting as a promoter of himself. And I think if that fight were to get rebooked, you're just going to see him do that more and more and more. He's got
Mm-hmm.
that personality. He's got the skill set. I was a little hard on him on his early fights in the UFC, but
He's came around.
yeah, he's definitely. I mean, the way you put out Daniel Rodriguez,
Yeah.
people be disrespecting D Rod, man.
Yeah.
That was a good fighter that he took out and made him look like nothing in there. So
Yeah.